I was having a conversation with a family member the other day, and an idea came up in conversation. We discussed the idea and looked at the feasibility of implementing the idea. And then my family member said, the devil is in the details. And I thought, of course, he's right. And then I thought, what in the world is the origin of the devil is in the details? And that's what you and I will investigate in this episode of History of Everyday Sayings. Hello, Steve Carter here, your host for the History of Everyday Sayings. I do thank you for joining me. Who is this show for? If you are a logophile, a philomath, or you are simply someone who loves history tidbits you can share with friends and family, well, this show is for you. As I mentioned, I was chatting with a family member about an idea that we were considering, and we discussed the pros and cons and how we might be able to implement the idea. And my family member said, the devil is in the details. Where in the world does that phrase come from? What is the origin of the phrase, the devil is in the details? I'm sure you have heard that said many, many times, and you have probably said that yourself multiple times as well. Let's begin with guidance from wikihow.com, wikihow.com. In their entry, what does the devil in the details mean? Dissecting this idiom. And under things you should know, they tell us, the devil in the details refers to situations that seem simple at first, but actually have important details you need to take into account. This phrase became popular between 1821 and 1969. That is quite a range in time, and as we'll see, the way we use the phrase today is from the 1960s as opposed to the 1800s, but we'll get there momentarily. To continue with WikiHow, it tells us that the phrase is featured in Bartlett's Familiar Quotations, and it made it in Bartlett's Familiar Quotations in 1969. WikiHow continues, there are variations on the idiom the devil is in the details, like God is in the details, or the devil is in the details, so are the angels. So what about the origin? Well, WikiHow tells us the devil is in the details evolved from the phrase God is in the details. And it continues somewhere between 1821 and 1969. The phrase God is in the details became popularized. This saying tells us that hard work and discipline, well, they are required for any project. It might have been used in a college seminar by art historian Abby Warburg, who was born in 1866 and lived until 1929. However, the phrase is widely attributed to German architect Ludwig Miles van der Rohe, whose life spanned from 1886 to 1969. The New York Times, well, they cited Ludwig's iconic expression in his obituary, and that may have led to a surge in its usage. Continuing with WikiHow, in 1963, the devil is in the details was used to discuss rebuilding Europe after World War II. Foreign ministers met in Europe to make important decisions about how to conduct negotiations and assist countries devastated by invasion. A gentleman by the name of Richard Maynard wrote an account of this committee meeting in 1963, and he noted that all of the officials had to remember that the devil is in the details. Let us now go to one of my favorite sources, Phrase Finder, the Phrase Finder at phrases.org.uk. For the entry, "The Devil is in the Details," this site offers the meaning of that phrase and tells us the details of a plan, while seeming insignificant, may contain hidden problems that threaten its overall feasibility. The source of the proverb, "the devil is in the details," is often attributed to the German-American architect Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, but this resource tells us this is almost certainly a misattribution. The expression derives from an earlier German proverb, "Der Liebe Gott steckt im Detail," which translates as "God is in the detail." Notice detail is singular here. God is in the detail. The site goes on. Mies van der Rohe is also associated with this earlier form, but although he may have used it, there's no evidence that he was the first to do so. Continuing in the migration of these phrases, an S was added. The earlier form is usually "God is in the detail." The latter form is more commonly "the devil is in the details." "The devil is in the details" only came into common use in the 1990s, and the site points out that van der Rohe died in 1969. And the earliest citation of it that I found in print is Richard Mayne's exploration of the workings of the European Union, the Community of Europe, dated 1963. And he quotes from that work, "On the principle that the devil is in the details, what should have been a merely formal occasion developed into a debate about the community's official languages and the site of its headquarters." The phrase might have been tailor-made for negotiations between European Union countries, and he points out they are renowned for their hair-splitting attention to detail. Moving on to Wikipedia.org. In part, this reads, the expression "the devil is in the details" is found in a 1963 history of post-war European integration. It is later attested in 1965. In 1969, it is referenced to be an existing proverb, and I believe that was by Newsweek, if I recall my earlier research on this. And this site goes on, Bartlett's Familiar Quotations lists the saying's author as anonymous. An editorial in the 1989 New York Times reflected on the apparent interchangeability of God and the devil in this phrase, citing various examples in print at the time, as well as the difficulty of determining which came first and how long either one has been in use. This entry in Wikipedia goes on to tell us, more recently, the expressions "governing is in the details" and "the truth, if it exists, is in the details" have appeared. And it gives a citation for this assertion. As I've personally used this phrase for years and years and years, I am surprised that it seems the origin arose in the early 1960s. It just feels older than that. But that's why we conduct investigations into the history of everyday sayings. All of the references that I have cited in this episode, well, you will find them listed in the show notes. I invite you to have a look at our website and explore some of our other podcasts, mostly focused on health, psychological, and emotional well-being. You'll find that website at stressreliefradio.com, stressreliefradio.com. If you would like to be in touch, do email me at cartermethod@gmail.com, cartermethod@gmail.com. If you have a phrase that you're curious about the origin and true meaning of that phrase, do send it along to me, and we will have a look and do a proper investigation to identify the origin and the true meaning. Again, that email is cartermethod@gmail.com. If you're not yet following the History of Everyday Sayings, I encourage you to follow where you get your podcasts. When you follow the History of Everyday Sayings, you will never, ever, ever miss an episode. Until our next visit together, your host, Stephen Carter, wishing for you and your loved ones blessings in abundance.